How are you guys doing? It is Monday, September 14th, 2020. Out here in this quarantine, I'm James Sims. For this episode of The Elite, I'm going to take you through the possible options for Giannis Antetokounmpo to play his next few years of basketball, because I'm pretty sure he's made it clear by unfollowing his teammates and just the way this this whole season ended. I don't think he's going back. And I think it's a pretty smart move considering he's 25 and he's already entered the prime of his career. You don't know how long that's going to last. So as of right now, because the Bucks already signed him, they have to trade him. They're going to have to pull an Anthony Davis, but they're probably going to get a lot more back because they have Giannis through 2026, I believe. But no, here are the possible teams that I think that can take Giannis away this offseason. So, just looking at these cities, because one thing that's to note, Giannis is an international player that's 25 years old. So I imagine he wants to play for a big market team, because, coming from Greece, I imagine you'd want to play for one of the big American cities. I don't know if you'd really want to, no offense to, Memphis or Portland or Indianapolis, but I don't think any of those teams are getting Giannis Antetokounmpo, because I think being international, you kind of want to play in the big city, especially if you're playing professional sports in a different city. It's like, if you were from America, would you want to play in Madrid or Barcelona, or would you want to play in, Levante? Or, if you were in, Berlin, or if you were in, Germany, would you play in Berlin or Munich? Or would you go play at don't get me wrong, Leverkusen's an amazing city, but it's if you're from America, you know the names of Berlin and so I feel I don't know if it's the same exact logic, but I believe that Giannis would want to play for a big market team, a team with a lot of pieces that they're willing to give up for him. And of course, he'd want to team up with another big time player. So I think that's another part of it as well. And of course, the team would have to be able to get rid of their stuff. So not teams that aren't in win now mode, that aren't getting rid of pieces to get him. So that already rules out the Clippers and the Lakers. And I'd say the Nets, because I don't think the Nets can afford him now. They probably right now I don't think they can, because they have Kyrie and KD. I don't think they'd be able to afford Giannis. They have the young pieces to get rid of for him, but I don't think they're gonna do it. I think Boston is an option, because Boston has a lot of good young pieces and they have a really, really great coach. But the question is, what pieces do you part with? Does Giannis want to, even though Boston is a great city, I think its track record may not be as attractive for a black international professional athlete. So that might be something, but I think that's always an option. I think the Knicks is always an option, because it is New York and they don't have that many pieces. They can just trade the farm and try to build around them. But they're a very dysfunctional franchise, and I think Giannis has some sense. So I don't think he's going to, unless he were to try to get another young player, say a Devin Booker, to join him in New York. I don't see him going to New York. I can see him going to the Raptors though. The Raptors have a lot of depth. They have a great coach. Toronto's a pretty big city, and they're just coming off of it. They got rid of Kawhi Leonard, so they're missing that piece. I could see the Raptors giving up Pascal Siakam and a good amount of their young players just for them to start their rebuild around Giannis Antetokounmpo with Nick Nurse as the coach, because Nick Nurse is a proven coach. Right now Toronto's an option. I could see Giannis going to Chicago, and they have a bunch of young pieces. That's an option too. So you can't really rule out the Chicago Bulls, because I keep forgetting Chicago is the third largest city in America. And considering they have two baseball teams, and considering it's a city that can be a two baseball city, Giannis would love the fan base in Chicago, and I think they'd really, really enjoy him. And he'd be of course, he'd be their best player since Derrick Rose, and that'd be very interesting to see the Chicago Bulls back in the playoff run since the Derrick Rose days. He's not going to Cleveland, Detroit, or Indianapolis, and he's leaving Milwaukee, so those options are completely off the table. I think the Atlanta Hawks are an underrated selection, because they have probably the best crop of young talents. And I think if they trade, Trae Young is their only untouchable player if they try to get Giannis, because they would try. And if I were Giannis, Atlanta's an up and coming city with a lot of culture, a lot of rap. There's a lot of stuff going on in Atlanta. It's making his rise as an up and coming city, and alongside that, he'd have the best young point guard in the game. at least the best young passer in the game that would be on his team. So I think that would help out a lot. I think in the back of his mind he's considering it, but I don't think he'd really go to Atlanta. He's not going to Charlotte or Orlando. No offense. I mean, he's from Greece. And I don't think he'd play for Washington because that franchise is a bit dysfunctional. I can see him playing for the Heat. The Heat are the Heat are a very, very intelligent, well-run organization. Pat Riley got Shaq, LeBron, Chris Bosh. He got all those players to Miami. I have no doubt in my mind he can get Giannis Antetokounmpo to come to Miami. And of course, he's from Greece. Like, I feel like a lot of people from outside of America, they definitely know about Miami. It's a big city on the beach, no state tax compared to California, so that's a better option. For a player like Giannis, I could very easily see him joining that team. And of course, they have a bunch of depth and young players that they'd be willing to trade to Milwaukee for Giannis. Of course, they wouldn't trade their biggest pieces. They wouldn't have to get rid of everything for Giannis, but I imagine that the players that would be left along with Giannis are still a contender in the East, and they are still Miami, and he can always get another player to join him in Miami after LeBron. After LeBron broke down that barrier, but like 10 years ago. Now jumping out to the West, like I said, I think the Lakers and the Clippers completely off the table. The Suns suck, no offense, so they're off the table. I don't think Giannis would want to play in Sacramento. I can see the Warriors getting him, and it's just the real question is, are they willing to trade Steph and Clay? I have no idea how they do it, to be honest, because I don't think they have the pieces to make a straight up trade unless they get rid of Steph Curry and or Klay Thompson to do so. Because Giannis is 25 and might win back-to-back MVPs. So they might have to trade a former two-time MVP who's in his early 30s, and Klay Thompson, who's kind of entering that stage of his career. They're both in their primes. It's just that I feel like the Bucks are gonna ask a lot more from the Warriors, and if they pull it off, I could see Giannis making a home for himself in Oakland. But I'm really curious. But I have no idea to see how the Warriors will pull it off. If they somehow were able to pull off a trade for Giannis and keep Steph Curry, and don't forget they still have the number 2 draft pick, so they definitely don't have to part with both of their best players. So that's also something to look forward to. I think the Dallas Mavericks are a viable option too. I mean, once again, big market city, smart owner, competent ownership. Luka Doncic is a young star to grow beside. I mean, and he's already there. Luka and Giannis could most definitely be the most fearsome combination or the most fearsome duo of players outside of LeBron James and Anthony Davis in the NBA in total. And it's just like, I think they're better than Giannis they're better than KD and Kyrie in Brooklyn, in my opinion. I like that, and I think the Mavericks have the pieces to make the trade, and it's not like they're making any draft picks anytime soon anyways. It's not like they're making any lottery picks anytime soon anyway. If they're going to try to make the trade for Giannis, I'd trade Kristaps. They have a lot of young players. They might not have to, but they might have to trade Kristaps for Giannis, and that's a very realistic option because the only way it can work is a trade. And the Mavericks are one of the few teams that have the pieces, the money, and the young, like the big marketability of its city, and of course the young phenom who Giannis can like put a little bit of his faith in. I think the Houston Rockets are a legitimate option if they get rid of Russell Westbrook. I think James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo could be Kobe and Shaq Part 2, probably better. But the Rockets would have to give up a lot. I don't think Russell Westbrook would be willing to leave after one season, but of course, I have no idea how that's going to go. But the Rockets could very well be an option for Giannis, and James Harden would get another crack at trying to be a champion. I think that could very well happen. Especially with their rivalry, I think it'd be pretty hilarious if they ended up playing on the same team. I don't think he's going to go to Memphis. Sorry, as good as Ja Morant and that young core is, I don't think Giannis is going to make all of this much of a fuss to leave Milwaukee to go play in Memphis. I could see him playing for the Pelicans because the Pelicans have the pieces. I don't think the New Orleans is big enough of a city for Giannis to want to come down and play just for the city alone. I mean, just in that area, I'd rather play in Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, and Miami than New Orleans. As good as that team is, and you'd have a chance to play with Zion. I don't think he and Zion would work out that well, but they'd still be a very tough team to stop offensively and defensively. I can see the Spurs being a very realistic option because Popovich is still their coach. I have no idea how long Popovich is going to be there. Giannis could always join up and link with someone else because I would imagine the Spurs don't have that much. I would imagine they'd have a good amount available in salary cap. I don't see him doing it, but I wouldn't be completely like blown away shocked if he did it. I like Giannis to the Nuggets, to be honest, because they have the young pieces that they can trade for him. And I think Giannis would actually like. No, I don't think Giannis would like playing in Denver as much as I think their team would get along very well and a lot of their pieces would be gone. I would imagine they wouldn't still have Jamal Murray after that trade or Michael Porter Jr. But I mean, that's always something as well. The Timberwolves have the number one pick and D'Angelo Russell and Carl. I mean, they have the pieces. I think the Timberwolves are just going to try to focus on the core they have now and use that number one pick and just try to see how their number one pick slides in alongside their other two top tier young players. And then another team to look out for, because I don't think it's going to the Thunder, the Trailblazers, or the Jazz. So, I mean, just looking back, I think the realistic options, the options I would look out for in the East, is mainly just Toronto and Miami but I'd keep an eye on Atlanta and Chicago. I mean, I think Toronto, Chicago, and Miami, just because of the cities they can attract a player like Giannis to join. Toronto has the pieces to trade, and they have a really good coach. And they literally won a championship last year, which means they're a really good organization. The Bulls are a big city with a bunch of young talent that they can get rid of if they're trying to make a rebuild and just start over tomorrow. And of course, Miami is that city with everything going for it. I think Miami is the screaming option, but I can't say you can't say for sure where dude's gonna go. I mean, it's his decision. Like a lot of stuff will come. Like a lot of criteria comes into this, but I think a lot of it is pointing to Miami, especially the fact that less state income tax, but. I'll skip past that one. But it's those cities, and the honorable mention in the East is Atlanta because they still have a bunch of young players. And I still think Trae Young, out of all of the players in the East, Trae Young is the best young passer at least. I would imagine if Giannis at 25 would want to play with anyone, he'd want to play with Trae Young the most as his point guard out of any player, out of all the teams in the East. But he could always get players to join him elsewhere. Out West, I think the best option is really Dallas. And then and Golden State is also a team to consider on the back burner. And maybe Houston, because Houston has the capital to make the trade and they have James Harden. He and James Harden hate each other too much for them to play, for me to think that they're actually going to join each other now in this point of their careers. But I do think that the Warriors are most definitely an option with their second pick. And how well their organization runs. I can see them because they got KD. They can get Giannis. But it's just really just those teams. But those are the teams really to keep an eye out for. But with that said, I really appreciate you for listening to all 13 minutes of this. It is Monday, September 4th, 2020 out here in this quarantine. Thanks again for hearing my piece, and peace out.